Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the leading employee benefits and engagement platform.
Hi everyone, this is Arindam Sinha from Vantage HR Influencers Podcast, and on today's episode we are going to learn about the topic role of HR in performance management. And I'm very happy to have with us Mr. Zubair Bhura as our HR guest speaker. Zubair is a master's degree qualified senior HR professional with more than 10 years of demonstrated human resource experience in Australia, with a proven history of working with distinct ownership model and global organizations spanning unionized and non-unionized environments, including retail and FMCG, fast food, hospitality and customer service, aviation and airlines, specifically ground handling, transport, warehousing and logistics. Throughout his career, he has directly worked with large portfolios spanning up to 1,200 employees and independent contractors, including sales and marketing, business support, customer service, and various operational roles in the blue-collar sector. Along with that, he provides support to senior business leadership teams during critical transformation and change projects, including new business ventures, diversification projects, and restructures, while being the long-term certified practitioner of Australian Human Resource Institute, which is the professional body for human resources in Australia. I'm very excited to have you among us, Zubair. Before starting with the topic, I'm very curious to know what motivated you to pursue a career in HR.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anindam. First of all, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to have me here today and giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm sorry, I'm just going to answer your question in 1 second, but before I do, I just get something out of the way. Anything I'm going to be sharing today are my own views, and I'm not representing any of my current or former employers. So I just thought I'll say that, and hopefully that's all very clear from the start. I guess my journey with HR started when I was in my teens, actually. Quite confused, like every other teenager. Just wasn't sure which direction I wanted to take in life and in my career. I stumbled across one of the books that my sister-in-law was pursuing her studies in MBA, specializing in HR. So I actually started reading that book and felt that this was something I understood and that I could do. Then I spoke with one of my cousins who was also pursuing his master's in HR in the UK and got a bit more information about human resources from him. And then I decided to move to Australia and pursue my master's as well from the University of South Australia in 2007. I graduated in 2009 and I guess I got my first job, and then transitioning from student life to professional life, I think I realized even more that this was the professional that I'm made for. And I've never looked back ever since.
Okay, that's really inspiring, actually. And having said that, I would really love to know, since every organization has a performance management system in place, and the purpose of a performance management system is, goes without saying, improve performance, yet often we find that it's not really delivered. So what are the most important problems with today's widely used performance management systems, in your view?
Yep, that's a good question. So performance management is a broad topic and comprises of various elements that need to tie in together to be effective. The best, I guess, to keep things simple, I'm just going to use what the Australian Human Resource Institute defines performance management as. It basically states that performance management is an all-encompassing term used to describe the practice that drives decisions about performance, remuneration, promotions, disciplinary procedures, transfers, and development needs within an organization. So essentially, it's a much broader concept than just performance appraisals or a disciplinary process, and includes different facets such as job design, recruitment and selection, training and development, career planning, etc., etc. So in my view, companies that are able to combine and align all of these elements together strategically and operationally, down to the most junior level, are the companies that actually are likely to thrive, and the ones that don't fall behind.
I really agree with you on this, Zubair. And moving on to the next question, business environment is indeed turning more agile and fast-paced, and that organizations are keeping near-term goals instead of longer terms. And also an organization's goals and values should be fed in performance planning to ensure an individual's performance aligns with overall strategy of an organization. Do you think it's important?
Yeah, look, I think in my view, short-term goal setting and having those frequent discussions are more effective than longer term goals and discussions. And I feel if your employees are aware on a more frequent and regular basis in terms of where they are going and how they're actually performing and whether there needs to be any type of realignment, it's easier for everyone to change, and managers are able to steer them in the right direction quickly rather than waiting for 6 to 12 months and then having those discussions, because resistance to change is harder and then the motivation becomes low as well. So I think, I'm more of an advocate for short-term goal setting and discussions.
So, Zubair, you believe that advocating employees' performance in short term is more convenient and also required these days?
Look, that's my personal view. Yeah. Look, if you look at different types of organization settings, you've got advocates of MBO, which is your management by objective theories that have been set by the person who introduced this was Peter Drucker sometime around the 1940s and 1950s. So there are companies that actually use his philosophy and still operate in 2020, 21, using long-term goals where discussions happen on a 6 month or on an annual basis. Yeah. It works for some companies, but it also doesn't work for many others. Personally, for me, I think having discussions on a regular, I don't know, maybe fortnightly or even on a monthly basis is very effective personally, because not only does it give managers the opportunity to provide that sort of constant feedback and build relationships with their employees, but also it allows managers to keep a lid on performance and steer behaviors and performance in the correct direction. So I feel there's a lot more pros of having those quick catch ups or touch points or even those discussions better than waiting for 6 months to 12 months and then letting your employees know how they are actually doing.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, having said that, what do you think, what are the necessities to keep in mind as a manager primarily to identify the drawbacks in employee skill?
Yeah. Look, I think as a manager, you first need to know what you are looking for. I think that needs to be identified first, and that needs to be defined very, very clearly. Once you know what you're trying to achieve as an organization or team leader or as a manager, you need to communicate very clearly to your employees. And after that, you can start monitoring and assessing everyone's performance and shortcomings and
Yeah, so when we are looking at a broader perspective, how would you reconcile the entire process?
I was just saying that it's actually before you start assessing employees, I guess, skills and strengths and weaknesses and development plans. The first thing, in my opinion, managers need to do, or senior managers need to do, is define what their goals are, and then communicate those goals very clearly to the employees. And then once that's done is when you have discussions around who's met those objectives and who hasn't and why. And that's when the discussion about the strengths and areas of improvement and development plans come in, essentially.
Hmm. That's something really important our viewers can keep a note of it. Thank you, Zubair. Moving on to the next question. Interestingly, organizations like Adobe, General Electric, Deloitte, among other leading companies, are getting rid of the traditional annual performance reviews and getting rid of rankings. Instead, they have started implementing more of a frequent feedback loop. In your view, what are the advantages, and if there are any, what are the disadvantages of a continuous feedback process?
Look, everything has its pros and cons, and I believe that no process is perfect. So I think one of the cons in my experience is that sometimes these frequent feedback sessions may your top performers or your good performers who are actually doing a good job may think that frequent feedback is a waste of time because they're already doing a good job. Then why do you need to give me feedback on something that I'm already good at? So sometimes people may think like that. Yep. And there's also sometimes people could feel that they are being micromanaged, and may have, the perception that they have to report on every single thing that they do, and the decision making is sort of always questioned. So I think, getting the balance right is extremely critical, and this varies from organization to organization and project to project. There's no one size fits all kind of an approach.
That was really detailed, Zubair. Thank you so much. And now, proceeding to the next question, how do you make people accountable for their own performance? Like, at the end of the day, they should be just as much or even more interested and maybe more responsible to improve on performance. Otherwise, at the end of the day, it's their career and their future as at stake. So, how do you make people more involved and accountable for their own performance?
Yep, that's a good question. So I think it goes back to our previous discussion on, setting clear goals and objectives and expectations. So that's part one. Part two is involve your employees in the goal setting process and consulting with them. Now, without going too much into the academic side of things, there are two schools of thought when it comes to this. The first one is where companies believe that there's something called a best practice approach, and there's another school of thought that talks about a best fit approach, performance management. Best practice approach talks about a universal set of ideas that companies can adopt, which works across any organization. And the best fit approach basically says there is no universal fit. You just have to align and change your performance management strategies based on the specific organization that you're working for. So I'm more inclined towards consulting with the employees and making sure that they're part of the goal setting process, because in my view, employees who are consulted during the process are more involved than those who are not. I also believe, that people should be reasonably accountable for their own performance. Whether it's a call center operator or a sales professional or a forklift driver or even a senior marketing manager. When I say reasonable, I mean the goals themselves have to be reasonable and achievable. You can't expect a junior account manager to make a high-level strategic procurement decision, for example, right? So, but when goals are reasonable and achievable, then I believe that teams and individuals must work towards achieving those goals sincerely. Sometimes people, even after best efforts set by managers, sometimes people are still not performing to the expectations. Um, and unfortunately, I guess one of the things that companies resort to is disciplinary procedures to make things very clear and sort of achieve that behavior modification, or even introduce some team or individual incentives. So sometimes even that works.
Hmm. I agree with you on this, Zubair. And do you see it's also a generational thing in terms of millennials, Gen Ys and Gen X sort of taking more ownership of their career? And they're more loyal to the profession than to the organization. Do you feel they're more open to taking ownership of their performance management in that sense?
Yeah. Look, I think it's a good question. I think although placing people into age brackets and Gen Ys and Gen X can provide organizations with some valuable information, I also feel that generalizing any group based on any attribute, whether it's age or gender, to make conclusive decisions about that group is not wise. Because out of the 10 people, let's say aged between 30 and 40, there will be at least one who's different to the others in terms of their motivation to work. So developing and implementing strategies based on such preconceived notions could miss the target. So I feel a better approach is consider people's individual circumstances, because each individual's circumstances are unique. We're all different. Our motivation levels are different. Our wants and needs are different. Our financial circumstances are different. Sometimes people's drives are different. Some people may want to move up the corporate ladder, and some people are just happy where they are. So I think the key is to understand what those differences are and what people want, and then basically, alter your strategies in accordance with that, with the ultimate aim of, you know, a person taking ownership of their own career.
Yeah, that's true actually. And we have already come to the end of our podcast with the last question, which is can you advise some basic elements which are necessary for effective performance management to our viewers?
Yeah, sure. Look, I think it's all about getting the structure right. I'm not sure if you've heard of Robert Mosley. He's one of the leading global experts on comp and ben and performance. Now, he talks about something called the golden triangle of rewards management. So essentially, the triangle is made up of three things: jobs, people and performance, and pay markets. So jobs is basically defining your jobs right. And that is through having a proper job analysis, creating job descriptions, establishing KRAs and KPIs. All of that links to the person's performance and behaviors. Some companies have a competency framework that they use, and some companies don't. Like smaller companies usually wouldn't have that, but larger global firms would have an established competency framework. And linking both of these, linking the jobs and the performance and the person to the external market, and seeing what sort of pay strategies would work for your organization, whether it's through pay surveys and benchmarking exercises, to establish your remuneration strategy. So I think a good, well-rounded performance management system should have a combination of all of these elements, pretty much.
This will be really helpful for our viewers, I can say that. So, Zubair, we have come to the end of the podcast, but before concluding it, there are some favorite questions which I always address to our speaker, which helps me enrich my knowledge of contributing more to the organization. Is there any favorite business book that you follow?
Absolutely. One of my favorite books is a book called HR from the Outside In. Mm-hmm. It's written by a person called Mr. Dave Aldrich. Now, he's a management educator and a HR guru, and has been shaping the HR profession for several years. And what he's basically talking about is how he sees HR's role evolving from a traditional role to being a more strategic business partner. So highly recommend that book to anyone who's getting into the profession,
okay,
or is an already established senior leader who is just looking to add more value to their business. Mm-hmm. I think he's written a lot of books. Okay. This is probably one of the best books that I've read.
Okay. Do you follow any HR leader as a role model?
Absolutely, yeah. His name is Dr. Armin Trost. He's a HR professor at the Furtwangen University in Germany. So he's a thought leading author. And he's also written a few books on performance and talent management and appraisals and human resource strategies. So these are some of the guys that I really look up to.
Okay. So before ending this podcast, I really wanted to know, what is that one piece of advice you would like to give to our young HR leaders?
Sure. Look, learn the language of finance and get a basic understanding of how profit and loss statements work and balance sheets and those types of things work. One of the best books I've read on finance is a book called Financial Intelligence by Karen Berman. That's also available on Kindle. Now, the reason I say this is because finance is one of the core languages of business, and it is important that HR professionals learn to communicate with their stakeholders in a language they understand.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zubair, for taking out some time from your busy schedule and helping us get forward into this topic. And we are very anticipated and looking forward to connect with you again in mere time.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Aaron. Likewise. Thank you. You too, mate. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day ahead.
Thanks for listening to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast, where we engage with HR influencers about human resources. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for new episodes.